Hi, my name is Andy Gunn, and today I'll be discussing the topic of industrialization and India. So, India prior to British colonization was actually pretty close to reaching that industrial phase itself. It had a pretty booming textile economy, it was starting to delve into steel, but once the European joint stock company started coming in and seeing how valuable their spices and tea and cotton they could grow there was, they decided to put India through a phase that historians like to call deindustrialization. Essentially, what happened is they wanted the monopoly on completed goods, and this was during the time of mercantilism, so they essentially reduced India to an export country where they would grow things like cotton, tea, spices, and then send them to Western nations like Europe and Portugal. And India wasn't able to really regain its footing in industries such as metalworking and textiles and just produce goods in general until the early 1900s, late 1800s. That was when the first steel company opened. And they weren't really able to reach that fully industrialized phase until after both world wars, after the British Raj, and when India finally achieved its independence in 1954. Now, after that, India became pretty industrialized pretty fast, and in this sort of growing, connected modern world, they faced some pretty interesting issues. Besides the whole debate about the population growth, and the whole debate about outsourcing, and the whole debate about they're kind of backwards, their culture is at risk. See, with the growth of things like modern developments, some positive changes have been made. There have been reduced numbers of arranged marriages in Indian cities, which is great. Women's status being elevated is a sign of a pretty developed nation, and India could be a major world power with a little more help in that department. But, as shown by this graph here, when surveyed by a group of university students, about over 80%, close to 90%, agree that the increase in migrants from both other parts of India into the countries surrounding it, such as Bangladesh and Bhutan, and even more industrialized nations like America and some of the European countries that come and manage like tech companies and stuff, think that the migrants have really increased because of a result of industrialization. And as you can see up here, about at least 60% to about 65% agree that changes in food, clothing, and traditional ceremonies have occurred due to industrialization. Now, while this isn't inherently a problem on its own, it's threatening to wipe out smaller things even within India's own cultural sphere, if you will. India's constitution recognizes 22 languages, for example, the most predominantly spoken languages being Hindu and Urdu, first and second respectively, which makes smaller languages like Akka, which are passed on primarily through oral tradition and the use of a formalized version that's taught to the youth, very, very hard to pass down successfully when there's modern inventions like television, which promote Hindu movies and films through Bollywood, and schoolhouses which teach in these two languages, and English, because, our westernized world basically requires us to speak English. Now, the Western influence on certain aspects isn't as predominant in some areas as others, but it's still to be considered when thinking about things like the spread of major fast food chains into India, which, to be fair, have been pretty considerate of the fact that most Indians are Hindu and they don't eat beef. But it's definitely concerning. So what can India do? Well, the change of culture isn't something you can exactly slap a couple of laws on and call done. The government does need to properly regulate certain Western spreads of influence, maybe not censorship as in censoring movies and films that come in, but definitely working to make sure that what businesses that do expand in are somewhat controlled. They could also pass policies or programs to help teach about the native language and cultures of India, and families themselves should really take it into their own hands, really. Each family should individually choose to preserve certain aspects and to allow other aspects to become more westernized in their day-to-day lives. I think with both the government and the families working together, India will be able to become a developed nation that still retains a pretty unique cultural identity. Thank you.